As you say, the White House would have been notified a couple of hours before these retaliatory strikes hit. And you say this is the start of a new strategy. What is that strategy? When's the last time Israel actually hit targets inside of Iran?
The last time was about a week after the 14th of April, the first Iranian ballistic missile assault on Iran. And then Israel retaliated with a very, very small, I would say minimalistic strike in one location near Isfahan, central Iran. And that was just to prove the point that we can get through your defenses. Israel wanted to do more, but refrained from doing so under American advice or pressure. That isn't the situation today, and this is indeed the first and largest Israeli strike, still ongoing as far as I know. And what, in terms of strategy, you know, again, to zoom out a bit and give context here, Iran has been at war with Israel for the latest, I would say, 20 or so years. Up until April, it was an indirect war where Iran used their proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and other proxies that they have in the region, and they fought against Israel. From April 14th and then October 2nd, Iran has engaged Israel directly, fired at Israeli civilian centers of population and at military installations. And now Israel is retaliating against that. And I think it's not been made official yet, but I believe that there is a new Israeli strategy that says we are not going to agree to continued Iranian aggression, whether direct by ballistic missiles or indirect through Iranian proxies. And what Israel is going to do is to hold the Iranian regime accountable. And what we're seeing now is, I think, the first stage of that, of the implementation of that strategy.
So, Jonathan, this is the implementation of that strategy. Would you categorise this as a broader war now? Because, as you say, Iran has been attacking Israel via proxies for quite some time, but now Israel is striking directly at military targets inside Tehran. You would expect Iran to retaliate directly as well. So is this now a wider war?
I think, yes. It's, of course, an answer that I'm not happy to give because it means that my country will be under additional fire. But I think, yes, what we're seeing is the first stage. I anticipate an Iranian retaliation, and I anticipate continued Israeli strikes. And, of course, both Israel and Iran, to a certain extent, we have surprises and we have additional capabilities that have not yet been used. And there are many things that Israel can do against Iran that it has refrained from doing. And as the situation unfolds, I think we will see that happening. Israel has been very, very specific this time around, only to strike military targets. But there are lots and lots of targets. And I would say that ultimately speaking about, strategy, when it all, when we clear away the noise, what eventually is here at stake is the Iranian regime. I believe, and this is my point of view and not yet the official Israeli point of view, is that as long as the Iranian regime controls Iran, Israel isn't safe. We can defeat one Iranian proxy and then another one. We're defeating Hamas, going to defeat Hezbollah to a lesser extent. But until the Iranian regime stops sending them money and weapons, we will not be blessed with quiet and peace. And therefore, I think that, the overarching strategy is one to engage with the regime and in order to force it to stop, whether through just the use of blunt force or other means. That's a few weeks and months in the future, but this is where we are heading.
Yeah, let me ask you about the timing. Just one final question here, because it is a number of weeks after that missile attack from Iran on targets in Tel Aviv and around Israel. 25 days, there you go. And it also comes at a time where we are just 10 days out from the US election. With this further engagement or new strategy, as you say, directly targeting Tehran, do we assume and can we assume that Israel will need more direct and indirect support from the US, from the White House?
Yes, I think that's a fair assumption. I think that Israel coordinates its efforts in advance. And I think that what Israel did today, even though it hasn't been said so by the Americans, was sanctioned by the Americans. And the targets were shown in advance, and they got at least tacit approval. That makes sense. And it really goes along the lines of the more minimalistic approach and not the bigger approach, which many in Israel believed was what needed to be done to strike hard at both military regime, economic and nuclear targets in order to send an overwhelming message to the Iranian regime. But what Israel has done is a much smaller version of that, probably taking into consideration what you mentioned, that we are ahead of very important elections in the US, and that Israel doesn't want this to be the main topic of the US elections. I think that the relationship is strong, and it is withstanding a lot of political pressure and external and internal interference on both sides, in Israel and in the US. And I think that the common shared interest here of undermining the belligerent and aggressive Iranian regime eventually will come to the fore, and the US and Israel will be doing this together. Israel will be executing it, and I think that the Americans will be supporting it.
Jonathan, thanks so much for joining the program today. I appreciate it. We'll be speaking to you again soon, no doubt.